Buongiorno Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. I am so happy to be speaking today with Alyson Morgan. Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
Alyson is a winemaker, an enologist, and also you are the director at
Podere Capaccia.
Podere Capaccia in Rada in Chianti. So how did you end up in the Chianti and in Italy from
Northern California.
Northern California?
No, a tiny town in Northern California. I'm from a town called Westport, which at the time when I was growing up, it was about 100 people, the population.
Okay.
Now it's probably dwindled down to about 35.
Wow.
Yeah. Right on the Pacific. It's in Mendocino County.
It's
beautiful.
beautiful up there.
Between the redwood forests and the Pacific.
Gorgeous.
But very, very small town. So I came over to Italy in 1999 through Kendall Jackson. So I came to work and do a harvest over here at Tenuto di Arceno, which is in Castelnuovo Beredenga. It's owned by Kendall Jackson.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Yes.
So, I knew I was going to learn a lot today.
So I had worked the previous two harvests with Ed Mead's estates, which is the Anderson Valley estate for Kendall Jackson.
Okay.
So when I found out they had an estate in Italy, I sort of planned to come over here. And my original plan was stay here for 6 to 7 months and then go down to the Argentinian estate of Kendall Jackson to do the harvest in February, get some international experience, and then go back to California.
Okay.
Well, met my husband the first day I got
You
here.
did not?
Yes.
The first day?
Yes. So I met him the year prior when I
Okay.
was here on vacation. So from my tiny town in Westport, another girl who we grew up with was living in Florence.
How fun.
Yeah. So she was working for one of the schools. You have her foreign students here.
Right.
And she knew my husband. And one day when we all met, he invited us over to dinner at his house. And that was it. It was my sister and I on vacation, and we were with Melissa, and then my husband's best friend and his wife Rebecca.
Oh my
who
gosh!
we were just talking about, and during this dinner, Fabrizio Pulloni, my husband, he had touched me on my shoulder, and I just remember having this vision, like, oh, this is our house. We have all of our friends over. It was like this whole projection. But this is 1998, so
People weren't manifesting then.
no. And there was no way to even keep in touch with people, really, except for written letters. So I was here during that trip. I did an interview up at the Kendall Jackson estate with the winemaker to sort of make plans and see. I had another year of university I had to finish, and so I thought, I'll set this trip up for once I finish school, I'll come over here and do the harvest.
Okay.
So that was how I got here. But my sort of love of Italy started back in high school because in my little town, we went to a high school, Fort Bragg High School, which was it was like an hour and a half bus ride for us to get to school. But it was, we were very fortunate. There was a teacher there who was originally from New York City, Italian origin, went to Columbia, Rhodes Scholar, totally overqualified to be teaching high school at a little school. And she taught us Italian. So there was a small group of us, who petitioned to have her teach Italian instead of Spanish. And since we were so few students, it was really concentrated. And so she told us all about Italy. Then she also taught art, history, humanities, took that class. And she also led groups over in the summer and springtime to go through Europe and Italy. So I went on one of those trips after my junior year in high school, and I still have the photo from Piazzale Michelangelo in high school, and I just remember just falling in love with Florence.
Yeah,
just
it was
absolutely.
the same for me.
It was
the same for me.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah. I just felt at home.
Me too.
And so then, flash forward, it was another 7 years before I got here, but that was my path to Italy.
I love it. Yeah. So there are so many great top points that I want to address about your story so far, but I do want to I want to go back to California. Because I think there are a lot of similarities between California and here, especially Northern California.
Yes.
And so I guess the first question I would ask is, okay, so you fall in love with Italy. You have this wonderful mentor, this teacher
Yes.
that I wish we all had, you know, because teachers are so valuable and they really do change the course of our lives. So when was it that you decided, okay, I want to be an enologist?
Well, so I grew up on the coast. My dad actually started making wine the year I was born. And
so it was your destiny.
I had never would have dreamed that I would end up being a winemaker. But I grew up around barrels and bottlings, and the way that he made wine was that he had learned from the Portuguese people that he worked with at the Georgia Pacific mill, because it's a big timber industry there. He learned to go buy the must, the juice, from the inland valley, and then just bring it back, and you could ferment it and age it in your barrels at home.
Right.
And granted, we're in Mendocino, big hippie community. My dad didn't use sulfites. It was all just like the completely natural wine. So it was very popular among the people, also in the neighborhood. So he always made wine. But when I went to school, so I also had another incredible mentor from my little town, who was one of the founding fathers of California agriculture. He was the founder of the Rice Growers Association, the Tomato Growers Association. He had first person to grow rice in the Sacramento Valley, and he was long retired, also a Stanford graduate from the 30s or something. Yeah, and I fell in love with listening to his stories about agriculture, the beginnings of agriculture, he and his friends. And then there was a geneticist. One of his friends was an apple geneticist. And I was in high school. I was a live-in chef for them during the summer times. And
Alyson, how cool.
It was.
You're so talented.
Because they had this summer home and they would just invite all these influential people. There was a chancellor of UC Davis would come, and the conductor of the Philharmonic. I mean, just amazing people in this little town. And so from 15 on, I fell in love with genetics, agricultural genetics. I also read a story in Reader's Digest. I don't know if your listeners remember Reader's Digest.
I think a lot of us, I think a lot of them do, and a lot of us do. I think it still exists.
I think so.
I don't know.
But in 88, there was this article called The Green Gene Revolution, and it talked about splicing Arctic flounder genes into strawberries so they wouldn't freeze, and I was fascinated. So I applied to UC Davis and in agricultural genetics and got in and started my career in science, studying fruit flies, because that's what you study with genetics, because they have a 2-week lifespan. And so we had this research project that went on 3 years.
Okay.
But it was on this last collecting trip. And my collecting trip is we go out in all our nerddom with our nets, go over to Napa, and collect fruit flies over fermenting bins.
Yeah.
So this is what we were doing. And after the collecting, we went up and had picnic in Rutherford Hill. This is above the Napa Valley.
Up there.
Yeah, I had this picnic, and I was sitting there going, it is too important for me. I need to live in a beautiful place. I grew up on the Pacific. I've been surrounded by beauty my entire life. And if I stay in agricultural genetics, I'm going to end up in the Midwest. I'm going to be in soy, wheat, corn. Nothing against the Midwest, but it's not the same. So as soon as I finished up the research with the fruit flies, I applied for a job with the grape geneticist on campus, because it just so happens I was attending the #1 school for viticulture and enology.
UC Davis has always been a pioneer in your field.
Yes. So I went to work for Andy Walker, amazing man, doing research on resistant rootstocks. So a lot of people don't know that actually the Vitis vinifera, the fruit part, the Sangiovese, let's say, isn't planted directly into the ground. It's grafted onto wild grape varieties that are resistant to pests or resistant to drought and whatnot. They're made from those grapes that you'd see along the highway in Texas, that don't have any berries on them. So though I worked with Andy for my last 2 years, and I fell in love with the viticulture side of it. And so all of my electives I would take would be in the grape identification or soil science. And at the same time, when I started to see wine as an option for grapes, in the summer, I would get a job. I got a job at Kendall Jackson.
See?
So and then I fell in love with the winemaking side of it.
Yeah.
Because the harvest was the most grueling, and I've never been so tired in all my life. We're working 100-hour weeks without a day off for two months, and I fell in love with it. I loved it so much. But at the time, it was so strange, but UC Davis didn't have a viticulture enology department. It was separate. It was plant science viticulture or fermentation science enology.
Okay.
And at that point, I couldn't choose because I liked both sides. And like serendipitous, they created the department the last year when I was petitioning to graduate in genetics. They made this new department, and I asked my advisor, can I double major? And so it added an extra year, but
worth it.
Well
worth it.
Because I knew I was going to end up working in the wine industry, and I'd have to be justifying myself the whole time, like, why are you studied genetics? Why are you working in a winery? Mm-hmm. So it was fantastic. I met all my classmates. They're still friends. Most of them are still in California. Not many.
No need to
actually
leave.
Went overseas. But it was just a fascinating time. I was learning so much, and then when I opened my eyes to that international side of it, when I was working during the harvest in '97 at Kendall Jackson, I found out they had a winery in Tuscany. I'm like, well,
guess where I'm going.
I think I'm going to try to have to go there. Yeah, so that's sort of my journey to the wine industry.
Okay. So I want to move to right now.
Yeah.
And because I think for a lot of, it's very clear to me that you are so knowledgeable. You've you've dedicated your life to this work, which I think for many people is like a dream job.
Yes.
You get to make wine in Tuscany.
Yes.
And you ended up in a really beautiful place.
Oh.
And we'll talk
the
about
most
that.
Beautiful.
Right. I think so
Yes,
too. I
yes.
agree. I don't want to, all the Chianti is beautiful, but I think Radda, where you are, happens to be one of the most magical places.
Yes.
So you live this very enviable existence. What does your typical day look like, Alyson?
Yeah. Yes, I'm very lucky. And I don't want to burst the beautiful Tuscan bubble that people...
It's okay. We can burst it a little.
Yeah. No, it's... your day-to-day life as a winemaker, the beautiful part of winemaking is that you do have the cyclic, thing with the year, seasons,
right.
So there's the busy times, the low times,
right.
and there, some people think in the wintertime you're not doing anything, but there's always something to do. It's like as soon as you get done with harvest, you're planting the cover crops, and then you're going into pruning, and then you're getting into the springtime. So day to day, like when I usually get there, I like to go, right now I'm obsessed with rain, so I go immediately to the rain gauge to see how much it rains, and then I go walk through the vineyards to check to make sure everything is okay, and that there's no mold growth, that there wasn't any damage from the wind, and so just sort of walk up and down the hills. It's a very small estate, so it's only 3 hectares, equivalent like 6 acres, and so you can walk it pretty easily, and then go into the winery, check the levels of all the wine casks in the tanks, and make sure everything's okay. And then here in Italy, then I usually sit down at my office, and I'm doing a lot of paperwork. That is one thing that I did have to learn when I got here, the difference between wine industry there and here.
Do you want to, I would love for you to share a little bit about that with us. Also because for those out there who might be listening, Radda in Chianti is in the Chianti area.
Right.
There are very specific and very stringent sort of obligations you have as a winemaker.
Many, yes.
And I can imagine that involves a lot of paperwork. So
Yes.
why don't you tell us a little bit about those main differences that you've encountered?
Right. So we're in the heart of Chianti Classico, which is like a little circle inside of the big circle of Chianti. So Chianti, which makes up almost all of Tuscany. So Chianti Classico is the black rooster is its symbol, and it's the first wine consortium that was formed in Italy exactly 100 years ago in May in Radda. It was where they signed their papers. Yeah. But the history of Chianti Classico goes back more than 300 years.
Oh yeah.
So really steeped in tradition. But that is just one side of it. So the consortium is the one that monitors the grapes that you plant, how many grapes you plant, how much grapes in terms of tonnage you get per acre, and then how you blend your wines, because we have to, Sangiovese is the core grape, 80 to 100%. And then when you get ready to bottle, you need to send samples off to the consortio, where they go through their whole battery of tests in the lab, and then they go through a blind tasting against other Chianti Classicos. Right. And then you have 6 months to bottle that tank of wine, and you get your neck labels, which all have a serial number on them, which are all traceable. So it truly, DOCG means the denomination of origin that's controlled and guaranteed. Exactly. And it truly is. Yeah. I mean, the level of control is...
There's a lot of...
Yes.
Hoops.
And I love it on one side, and then it does mean a lot more work for you and the bureaucracy side. And I love the tradition of Chianti Classico, and I do think that it is the best wine quality of wine to price ratio. You can't beat it. Chianti Classico is the best worldwide. But that is just one of the governing bodies that I deal with. So you have the Department of Ag.
Obviously.
Yeah. Then you have, it's called repressione frodi. It's fraud repression. Yeah. And so you have your registers. So every day, every bottle of wine that leaves, I have to put it into the computer so that they know at any given time how much wine you have in your winery. So I actually just had to complete, today is actually the deadline, I already did it, but where you have to transmit everything to the Department of Ag exactly at this point in time, how much your inventory. Okay. So between bottled wine to tank wine. So you have that. Then you also have another governing body, which is called the TCA, which governs the IGT wines. So you have DOCG at the highest level, then you have DOC, IGT, which is the super Tuscan.
Exactly, the ones that I love. We'll get to that in a second.
And then you have table wine. So those are the classifications. So those are sort of the wine regulation sides, and then you have also all the legal things that you have to do based on the state government, then the provincial government, and then down to the municipal government. Right. So there's a lot of registries that you have to always keep up to date.
Yeah, it's serious business here.
Yes, it is.
And in Chianti Classico,
it's very serious.
It's the whole sort of identity of the place,
right. And it is, and I you get inspections, but it's always a good thing. Like, I always feel like this is good. They're actually checking up on everybody. I
agree. 100%.
And and it's strict, and maybe sometimes you haven't done. They might give you a fine, and it's okay. It's like, I'm glad they're doing that.
I agree.
Really
it's also, you're part of a very, I don't want to use the word elite. That's not it. But you're part of a very special group of winemakers. Yes. And it should be like that, So you and I had talked, I say this every time I see you, and I say, Alyson, I'm not a big fan of Chianti Classico, but your Chianti Classico is different. And I tell you this all the time. Every time I see you, and I can drink your wine, I'm happy. Yeah. And I always say, you're not going to change my mind on this, but your wine kind of convinces me. Oh. So even though I'm a bigger, I love all wine. Right. But I find your wine is really excellent. So I want to talk about the wines that you produce at Podere Capaccia. Right. And I also want to talk about why you think this part of the Chianti, which is already, all of the Chianti is already just like pure magic, right? What makes Radda so special? And what makes your wine so special?
Right. Okay, for one, Radda is really at the crest of a wave right now, through all the smaller appellations within Chianti Classico. It is really, the quality is unmatched. A lot of it has to do with the conditions. We're up high. We're at 550 meters, and we're on the north side of Radda. So we have the Monte San Michele behind us, which goes up to like 700-800 meters, which always brings in this cool air coming off the tramontana type thing that comes down, bringing in these, always have these nice breezes and the cooler air, because as climate change progresses, we're at an advantage. The cooler areas of Chianti Classico are at an advantage, because maybe in the past it was a little bit harder for us, because when it would get to end of September, October, when the weather was getting a little bit variable, it would be harder to get to ripeness for the Sangiovese. Where now it's getting harder for those regions that are in the hotter areas,
in the more southern areas.
Yeah, because when I've been at Podere Capaccia since 2012, and so 12 years, long time, but it's in terms of climate, it's a short amount of time, but I've already seen huge changes. I up until 2016. It was really difficult to get our wines to 13% alcohol. Okay, so we have levels that we have to meet by Chianti Classico. You have 12 for the Chianti Classico, 12.5 for Riserva, and 13 for the Gran Selezione. It was really, really stressful and hard to get to there. At this point, since 2016, I don't have a wine under 14% alcohol in the winery. Wow. Yeah.
And that's all due to
to these hot, warm long
really
summers,
hot, long
dry.
Summers,
Yeah, and
unbelievable.
It's, we're not at a point where it's getting difficult to make the wines, but you really want to keep it under 14 for Sangiovese at least, because you lose all your volatiles, your nice aromas. Cabernets, those can handle up to 15. Really, you don't feel it at all. But we are really blessed with our location, and plus Radda is sort of split into 3 different zones. We're in the northern, probably cooler zone, and then you go down. There's the Pesa Valley. Then you come back up, and there's the town of Radda, and then you go back down, and there's the other valley of the Arbia, and then you go to another area closer to Castellina. So, and they're very distinct. Everyone amazing, but very different wines in every area. Based also. We're on the northern side. We're sort of between 2 geological plates. There's the Silano plate, which is sort of like the uplift from the bottom of the sea, like where San Gimignano, that side, where people find like fossilized fish and things. So it's that white limestone. And then we have the other plate, which is Montemorello, which comes down, it's more the sandstone and the galestro, the shale. So we're actually right on the convergence of these two. So we have difference even between our vineyards, even though we're so small. But there's we start up at 550, then there's a slope, and then we come down to it's about 500 meters, and that's where you have more of the Silano and then more of the limestone. Up top, you have more of the shale, and so it's this variation, but it gives you a lot more elegant wines. You can have some of that floral notes. What's this, like minerality to the nose, which is sort of typical to our side of town, So, but you can pick it out when you do a tasting, but. That's sort of what sets Radda apart.
Okay.
And it's a lot of small estates. Ours isn't rare. It's not rare to have one that's only 3 hectares. I mean, we have a couple really big estates in town, but other than that, it's like from 10 hectares down to, there's one that's only 1 hectare.
Yeah, the majority in Radda are smaller.
Yeah.
How many bottles do you produce a year?
Oh, we only produce about 18,000 bottles. Yeah, so it's very small.
And do what do you produce?
So we do a Chianti Classico,
which I love.
Yes.
And I'm so hard to please.
And
it's so good, Alyson.
You know what it is? Okay, so you're asking like what makes mine different or whatever. So I do whole berry fermentation. So a lot of people think of Sangiovese, Chianti Classico as being tannic, stringent, maybe a little unpleasant.
Yeah, it's a little harsh for me on the palate.
And what I like to do is leaving it with the whole berries. So the berries, they're all hand picked.
Okay.
They come into the winery in the crush pad. They go up a conveyor belt and they drop into this destemmer, which knocks the grapes off the stems. Then they go onto a selection table where we're there picking out all the stems and leaves, anything the green, and then they're gravity fed into the tanks below.
Right.
And then we do pump overs. But what you get is that you're not breaking the seed. The seed is where there's more of that, sort of bitter tannin.
Right.
And I just want to get get it from the skins, so it's a lot more delicate. It has this softer mouthfeel.
Exactly. It's velvety.
Yes, that's my goal.
It's velvet.
Yeah.
You've achieved your goal.
That is my velvety, silky. That's what I want. Yeah. So, and it still has that freshness. Chianti Classico, is only aged in the big oak casks, so it doesn't have the oakiness. It doesn't have.
It's a young wine.
Yeah, it is, and you can immediately enjoy it. I'm coming out a little bit later than other people, usually a year later with my Chianti Classico. I like to leave it in the wine cask a little bit longer. But it's so smooth. I say it's a little bit of a dangerous wine because it goes down too smoothly. And before you notice the bottle's empty, and you're like, how did that happen? Yeah, and you're
too good at what you do. You're too good
because it's actually little over 14% alcohol this last vintage, but you don't notice it at all.
I know.
It's just so smooth and fresh and fruity, and it goes with everything.
It really does.
And you can even drink it without anything.
No, it's wonderful. It's a really nice
on an empty
wine.
stomach. Breakfast. It's everything.
No comment.
No.
And what else do you produce?
Yeah, and then we have a wine that's our Reserva, Sangiovese, 100% Sangiovese, called Quercia Grande.
Okay.
And this is on the slope. It's on our oldest vineyard, which is planted in 2007.
Okay.
And it is aged, though, in oak barrels for 18 months, 30% new. The rest are second, third pass, and then passes in the botte for 6 months.
Okay.
And then stays 6 months to a year in the bottle. So that's the first two are 100% Sangiovese. Then we have a true Super Tuscan, which is 50% Cabernet Sauvignon, 25 Cabernet Franc, and 25 Sangiovese.
Okay.
So very small quantities, though. We only make about 2,500 bottles of that because it's only a small area of the vineyard dedicated to Cabernet because we are in Chianti Classico, so Sangiovese is king.
It really
but
is.
we do keep the Cabernet separate. We pick it separate, and then it gets fermented, aged in new oak barrels, actually for 2 years. So it stays there for 2 years, and then at the end, before bottling, gets blended with 25% of our highest, the Quercia Grande Sangiovese of the same year. Nice. So we always prepare those wines at the same time. Okay. Yeah. So those are the three wines that we make.
Okay, and let's talk for a sec about where can we find your wines?
Yeah. So in Italy, we're all in restaurants and wine shops. Okay. We're not in any big stores. Yeah. No. So we have in various restaurants here in Florence, Prato, Pistoia, Siena, and Arezzo. Okay. And in Chianti Classico. Right, yeah. Then I export to Austria, and so I have this great importer who's coming this weekend she does a lot of by mail. So people can buy the wine from Germany and Switzerland and Austria there. Okay. Then a lot of our wine is sold in Belgium because the owner of Podere Capaccia is Belgian. Got it. He's from the Flemish area. Okay. So we have a big distribution up there through Brussels and Antwerp. Okay. All really, really high-end restaurants and wine shops in Belgium and a little bit in Holland. Then we actually just this year started exporting to the U.S. Oh, yeah.
That was my question.
It was because it's hard as a small producer. The U.S. is so huge. You really can't think of being all over. And so actually I concentrated on Colorado. I have this wonderful importer who distributes to all the also neighboring states of Colorado. Great. So she works a lot with the ski areas, and which red wine does great up there. And then also Santa Fe, where the owner's sister lives. So we have a big sort of distribution in the restaurants in Santa Fe.
There's a really nice dining scene there.
Huge. So that's where we began, and then hopefully by the end of the year we will have on the West Coast out of San Francisco. I won't mention the name now since we're not collaborating yet, but a really great importer who focuses on Italian wines.
Wonderful.
So hopefully we'll get to California because I have a lot to people that I grew up with that want to know where exactly. It makes it hard to ship from the Italy. It costs almost €10, a little bit more a bottle to ship it over, and so it a little cost prohibitive.
It's a lot. Yeah, and maybe that would also, we were talking before we started recording, because I recently got back from the States, about just how expensive wine is.
So expensive.
And I guess if you know, I think about things like that. It's not like I don't think about that.
Right.
But it is so expensive now to
Yeah.
buy. You can, I mean, it's still, you can find
Yeah.
manageable, you know, you can find okay prices, especially on Italian wines.
Yes.
You know, in the States, it's the California wines that are so expensive, and also
Yep.
now wines from Oregon and
Oh,
and other
completely.
places. So
Yeah.
I find myself, I tell everybody this, but I'm kind of, when I'm in the States and I'm at like a wine shop, I'm buying Italian or French wines.
Me too.
And then when I go out, as we just discussed, I'm getting a cocktail or a beer because wine is too expensive, and I can't justify it to myself living here.
No. If for one glass,
one
it's
glass?
what you could get.
No, I can get, you know, I can
More
get,
than a bottle.
I get $20 for
Exactly.
a glass of wine. Do
Right.
you know what I can get here?
I know. It
It's
goes
too-
against
I can't.
my.
Yeah, I can't. I
my
just
soul.
can't. Exactly.
Right. No.
So hopefully, and this obviously we'll put everything in the podcast description, but hopefully people will be able to see your bottles on
Right.
shelf soon in
Exactly.
California as well,
Yeah.
and hopefully eventually on the East Coast.
Oh, hopefully. I had started working in New York with the Bastianich group. You know, I was going, but it was getting a little bit difficult with all the regulations getting in the pricing. You know, and
That's
because the
always
thing
right.
is that the price that you could sell a bottle of wine here, you know, wholesale, it was like half. In order to get it to New York, you're going to have to drop your price pretty much by half in order for it to get on the table at the same price more than they would be paying here. So the numbers just didn't work out for the East Coast. So far with the Colorado and the West Coast, the numbers, I can pretty much keep my same European pricing.
Perfect.
Which is good. So that's sort of the one thing. But we'll
see.
we'll see.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
One step at a time. So I want to go back. You have such a great story, Alyson, and you know, I wonder, what advice would you give to young people? I know you're a mom like me.
Yeah.
I think the field of wine has become very sexy, and we'll talk about that in a second. But probably you've been in this business now for what, over?
It's been 27 years.
Yeah, I was going to say over 25 years, 27 years. So it's changed a lot, and we'll definitely address that in a sec. But I feel like a lot of young people are very interested in the field. So what kind of advice would you give to somebody who wants to be like you someday?
Right. I always tell them it's a wonderful field because there are so many things to do within the wine world.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're interested in agriculture, you can go on the grape side. If you're interested in chemistry or science, you can go into lab. Then you can go into wine. Then you can get into the wine appreciation.
Right.
You can do a sommelier. You can work in a tasting room.
Exactly.
So if you want to get into it, I always say just get a job, paid internship, or work a harvest. You know, work at a winery, or even just work in the tasting room. Because just being in the tasting room, you're going to learn so much about wine and winemaking, and see if it's for you. Because it's tough work, you know, when you work the harvest. You have to be willing to work hard.
It's a lot of work, and it's
long
a big
hours.
deal here.
Yes, and you have to know how to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's very knowing a lot about a little about a lot of things.
Right.
And the one thing that turns people off sometimes is they say, I'm not good at science. So if you went to get a degree, you know, a lot of people are like, I don't know if I want to do all the biochem or whatever it is.
Or all the what you did.
Yeah,
you took a very,
exactly. I took it. Yeah,
because
I
that was you were very much on the more sciencey side of things, but other people might be on the more
they want to
marketing.
But the good thing about winemaking is you learn a lot on the job.
That's what I was going to say.
So,
see, I find it interesting that actually you really only talked about practical experience.
Right.
You have this very academic background.
Yes.
But you really said, you know, get your feet wet, get in there, get it, you know, harvest, taste. I would say probably tasting. Right.
You know, and find people that are interested in it as well, because it's hard to think I'm going to buy a different type of wine every day. No, you get a group of people, everybody brings a bottle of wine, and then you get to taste a whole bunch of different wines in one night. I mean, I have a friend who's a master of wine who is in the Bay Area, and they have to taste 30,000 wine, or I'm probably underestimating, but and really high end. So they form groups, and everybody brings in bottles because that's a good way to taste a lot of different types of wines. So that too, it's really important to understand what you like, because a lot of people get enologist and sommelier confused.
Yeah.
I mean, I just watched that, Drops of Gold. I don't know if you saw it on Apple TV. It's a little mini series.
No, I haven't.
Oh, you should.
I'll watch it. Of course.
It's beautifully done, but at times in this thing, they do sort of confuse the two, and they're so different. They're so different. I could never do what a master of wine does, because my palate is conditioned. I've been 25 years in Chianti Classico.
Yeah.
So I love Sangiovese. It's my favorite wine. It's what I like to drink. I like that acidity. I like those cherry fruit notes. So I know a lot about that. And then when I was in Mendocino, it was the Pinot Noir, Zinfandel Chardonnay. So I know my little regions. I know nothing about like the world of wine, all these little regions across the world. Right. It's fascinating. I would love to know a lot about
that. It's a lot of work.
But it's a lot of work.
It's a huge amount of work.
I just think of the variability between my side of Radda and the other side of the valley.
Right.
So I couldn't imagine knowing like what on the right bank, whatever is like. So one, yes, taste a lot of wine. Talk to winemakers. I've been very fortunate. I was talking about my Italian teacher, Signora Huber, then Fran Dubois, the founder of agriculture, and then I have to think like Van Williamson, who was the winemaker at Ed Mead's, who still a friend, came to visit a couple months ago. He gave me the chance to work in the winery. I had no experience working in a winery except for washing barrels with my dad when I was probably 8. But there was he just said, here, and it was a very tough job. I was the only woman probably who had ever worked there. It was grueling. They didn't treat me any differently. It was it was tough, but he took a chance on me. The same thing with the head winemaker, Jonathan Rodwell, who's another good friend, who is the head winemaker of Tenuto di Arceno, who said, come on over, and didn't really speak a lick of Italian at that point. I had my high school Italian in the back there somewhere, but had to learn from scratch, and so I could go on. I mean, even when I left Tenuto di Arceno, I went to Villa Sant'Andrea, and the director there, Andrea Stopponi, another still good friend, he took a chance on me, and so I was able to work my way, gradually learning the Italian wine world with this experience being in the winery, but having people take a chance on me. The same thing with my position since 2003 now has been more of a managerial. I've been in charge of these small estates, like from square one, do everything from choosing the grapes to selling the bottles of wine, everything in between. So, but at the beginning, it was I had to learn a lot, about running a business in Italy, and so, but there's a lot that people can do within the whole wine world, and I have to say the people in the wine world are amazing people around the world. They're just usually down to earth. I mean, we're in agriculture, we're all farmers, and at the end, fundamentally we're farmers, and so there is this just down to earth feeling when you're around other winemakers, and I can't say enough about it. Unfortunately, I don't think either of my kids are going to go into the wine world. Who knows? You never know. Yeah, my daughter grew up. I mean, she spent the first 3 years. I took her to work with me, so she was always, smelling. I have beautiful videos of her being like 3 years old smelling wine. No. Yeah, but no, she has no interest anymore in becoming a winemaker. But hey, I had a winemaker dad, and I never thought that I would
and then look
end
at
up
what
making
happened.
Wine. Exactly.
But I think there's so much about your story that it would seem, I mean, you used the word at the beginning, you used the word serendipitous, but you've also been, I don't think it's just sort of luck or being in the right place at the right time. I think you've been very good. It sounds like, first of all, you've had good luck encountering people who were willing to take a chance on you, but also you kind of put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the best advice I would give to somebody who's, you know, who is interested in anything really, is just try to make those connections, find a mentor.
Make a plan.
Make a plan.
Make a plan.
Exactly.
You don't have to stick to the plan.
No.
But I've always made 5-year plans. And so, and I just, you put it out there, and you may have this goal,
Right.
and then, and doors open up.
Exactly.
And but you have to put it out there. You have to have.
So in your 5-year plan originally, when you first came to Italy, you know, that famous first time that we all had that we never came back from, but did you say, how long was that for, Alyson?
The original, it changed the minute I met my husband.
Oh,
it did. It was.
I love stories.
Yeah, I know.
You know
and our
do.
love, it's magical, and it is to this day. I mean, he is really. I still get butterflies when I see him walk in. I know I'm blessed. But they're a little family.
I love it. I love your story. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, it's just, you know, like I was saying earlier, there is this magical, you know, your story and all this serendipity, but there's a lot of hard work behind it. And you know, I know you're a mom.
Yep.
You know, you're a U.S. expat. You know, you talked about bringing your daughter to work when you were 3. I mean, it's not easy to balance all of these things, and then also really be at the mercy of Mother Nature as well.
Yeah.
You know, which always throws you. You know, can throw you a curveball at any time. So I think there's a lot of resilience also in your career.
Yeah, it is. It's hard work, and you can't look at you just have to take it day by day.
Exactly.
I always think it's just like each day, and then you look back and you're like, wow, I've been doing this for 25 years, you know, but when you take it just like piece by piece and those little, you know, I say I do a 5-year plan, but then it's broken down to week plans, you know, 1 week. And then when you have kids, it's day by day.
Exactly. I was just going to say, I've gotten to a point now, and at this point in my life, where I'm not making any plans. I'm just like, let's get through the day.
It's crisis management.
Right, exactly. It's survival mode, and then we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Right.
So I don't blame you for not wanting to drink too many wines that don't come from your specific area, but I have to play devil's advocate because I know you do drink other wines.
Yes.
So, you know, to somebody who's listening to us right now who doesn't know that much about wine, what advice would you give? For example, in addition to Chianti and of course to your wines that come from, you know, this region, which is really quite close to where we are right now. Are there other wines that you absolutely love, whether Italian or from anywhere else? And you've worked for a long time in California.
Yeah,
as well.
I do love Pinot Noir.
So do I.
Yeah, and there is sort of a similarity with Sangiovese because it is a wine that really adapts to where it's grown.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variability, but I love the Mendocino, Anderson Valley Pinot Noir, and Van Williamson, you know, who was my first boss in the wine area. He came to visit and he brought me bottles of his wine. He makes this wine witching stick, and it's like brings tears to your eyes. It feels like home.
It tastes like
home.
Tastes like home.
Yeah,
you know?
It's magical. Because I haven't been home in like 5 years. It's been the longest I've ever gone without being home. And so it's like those things, like the smell of the ocean, the taste of Pinot Noir from Anderson Valley, and also from Oregon. There's amazing Pinot Noirs.
They're making excellent Pinot Noirs.
Yeah. And also, you know, with climate change and
I was just going to say it's a climate thing.
Yeah,
a lot of it comes down to that.
Exactly. It's going to be harder and harder to make wine in Napa because look at just the wildfire problem and smoke taint, which is impossible to get out of the wine, and so a lot of my friends have had to deal with all these wildfires, and then I will love a rosé from the south of France. There's something about the color and it's like summer in a bottle.
I know.
Yeah, I love those. I love bubbly. I love champagne. I love Franciacorta. And then there's my favorite white wine is from Salina, the island off of Sicily. Tiny island.
I love Sicilian wines.
Yeah, me too.
They are phenomenal.
I love the Etna wines.
Say the name of the one you
Salina.
just...
Yeah, Salina sits in it. Actually, so my good friend, you might No, Natasha Sant'Andrea. She
No.
used to own the Tenda Rosa, good friend of...
I know the Tenda Rosa.
Okay, so her partner owns an incredible hotel. He's from Salina, and they started making their own wine there.
Oh.
Aiole, I think it's called. And just fantastic, because it has a salinity to it.
Exactly.
You know, that just pairs so well with food. It's the best. So those are probably, if I have to pick, you know, beyond Sangiovese, because Sangiovese is also there's a lot of variation between them. There's also the Brunello, the Sangiovese Grosso, and then but those are my main go-to wines that I hold dear to my heart.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I guess something that I'm curious about is, you mentioned earlier that let's talk. I want to go back 1 second to Radda, because I really do think it's a unique place.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, like, you mentioned that you work with small, like you do, can you explain a little more what you do, not beyond what you do at Podere Capaccia, what you do for Radda?
Okay, so Radda is a very special community. We have a wine growers association, or Vignaioli di Radda, and I actually just recently became a council member of the Wine Growers Association.
Congratulations.
And with my entry, we actually outnumber the men now. There are more women on the council than men. Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah. So that's one of those things that you see changes. So many women. In Radda, I would say, represented by the council, but pretty much 50-50 between women that either own the wineries, make the wine, or manage the wine.
I love this.
At any side. Yeah, so very well represented there. And so it's a big collaboration. We sort of realize also that, high tides lift all boats. So there's this sort of cheering on of each other, and there's not that jealousy of like, oh, you see somebody get, on the 100 points on Wine Spectator, but it's
numbers.
Yes, and there is this sort of support in sharing of ideas, and this is happening to me in the vineyard. Is this happening to you? There's this
collaborative spirit,
without a fear of
like
saying like, oh my God, something's wrong. And this it's rare. You don't get this in a lot of these little small regions. And I just like to do my part. I don't want to let the rest of Radda down, and the owner of the winery, of course, because it is a huge responsibility. He's put this winery in my hands and just sort of said like, okay,
go with it,
go make wine. And he and just a little about Podere Capaccia, which sort of sets it aside as well, which it's this rare property, which is actually a small hamlet called the Borgo, Borgo Capaccia, that sits on the top of this hill. And it's 6 buildings, these beautiful Tuscan stone buildings, which when I got there were 5 of them were all crumbling. So we have been spending the past 3 years restoring this Borgo. So I've been overseeing this project where one of the buildings has become the tasting room, which
we're perfect. Continue, because this is a perfect segue into my next question.
So it's and we're finishing the other. 2 of them will be part of the agriturismo. One is just like a little hunting lodge, fireplace, little place to hang out, and then another one of the houses where Donato, who works with me, we're just 2 people at the winery. He does all the vineyard managing and cellar master. He'll be living on site. He'll be there, and we're planning the inauguration in May.
Wonderful.
So yeah.
Oh, this is so exciting.
It is.
My clients are going to be really happy about that, and also everyone who's listening.
It's a magical location. Even people in Radda recognize that Capaccia is rare because you have these 360-degree views. We have Volpaia on one side. We have Radda in front of us. We have Albola, the castle of Albola behind us.
It's all magic.
Yeah, it's magic.
I can't think of a better word. I know we've used it a lot, but it is such a spectacular place. So that was going to be my next question for you.
And
what's coming up in the future?
Yes, this will be the final piece of a big puzzle that started when I first got to Capaccia. Okay. So we replanted vineyards, almost all of them.
Okay.
And then the next step was building the underground winery. Mm-hmm. So in 2017, we inaugurated the brand new winery. And then the next step was restoring the Borgo. So, and this Borgo, it dates back to the 1200s. I mean, it's hard to sort of, as Californians or, Americans, to wrap your head around it. But the original tower is the 1200s, so very strategic between the Ghibelline and Guelph Wars. The name Capaccia comes from root word of Latin for hill, and then accia is that suffix that sort of means like nasty, bad. Yeah, because it's really
the bad
impenetrable on all sides. You'll see when the road, is very steep, but once you're up there, and so right now I'm setting up the exterior where we'll have the terraces. We can set up tables, and so already I'm doing tastings.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you.
So even this afternoon, I have a group coming from the U.S.
Perfect.
And so I do light lunch, tagliere, with meats and cheeses, and we taste the wines. I first do a tour of the vineyard and then the winery, sort of explain the whole process of how to make wine, and then have a sit down tasting.
Okay.
So it is a very special place, and you get there and you've never seen anything like it. The views are just breathtaking.
Yeah. Alyson, I'm so happy for you. This is I think going to be a very exciting new chapter, and really just couldn't be happier that you're a part of it in such a big way. I mean, this is huge. It's a hamlet. I mean, it's a whole. It's a huge project.
Yes.
How many people will be able to stay at the Agriturismo once it's open?
Yeah. So there's going to be 10.
Posti,
could sleep 20.
Oh.
So there's 10
great.
doubles. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's going to be, but it's sort of a special situation where it's best if it's just rented out to one big group.
I was just going to say, right.
Because there's one main kitchen area, then there's going to be a pizza oven, and there's one pool.
Okay.
And so we already have groups set up because through Belgium, we have like the Chamber of Commerce of Antwerp is coming down, and they're renting out the whole property.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we can do tastings.
Private events, tastings.
Yes. Yeah.
But a good place, for example, people who are planning on traveling with family, things like that.
Oh,
okay.
Ideal. It's ideal. And Radda itself, it's 5 minutes to get to Radda, just by car, and it's just
and that whole area. I mean, if somebody is based in Radda, you can really,
go anywhere. Yeah.
So my last question is not an easy one.
Okay.
And I have a very special relationship with the Chianti as well. But beyond your sort of professional prowess, because you're a star, what does Chianti and Radda more specific, what does it mean to Alyson? Mm-hmm. Not just to, the enologist,
right,
the expert.
Well, when I first got to Radda, so I've gone and worked and lived in various areas within Chianti Classico. So first Castelnuovo Redenga, then in Florence, San Casciano, and now Radda. And I didn't know anybody there. And then when we formed the Wine Growers Association, I started to get to know people that are just lovely, eccentric, and just an incredible group of people that I felt very welcomed in. Because a lot of people ask me when you first came here as a foreigner, making wine as a woman, whatever.
Yeah, it's something I'm curious about as well.
I never ever felt. Maybe I couldn't understand if they were saying things behind my back at the beginning.
I doubt it.
But no. But I always felt accepted. And when I first got here, there was a lot of curiosity because I had a degree in winemaking.
Yeah.
In a lot of, at that time, there weren't a lot. It was more consultants that went around to the individual wineries.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and there weren't people in the winery, working in the winery that had an education in winemaking. That's changed because now there's a great program in Florence. There's one in Siena. There are a lot of younger people coming out and joining the winemaking workforce. Yeah. So for me, Radda, to get back to it, has been very welcoming, but also I was in Panzano for 10 years, and I loved Panzano. That is like a family to me as well.
Too. Yeah. Everything's such a little gem,
little gem. And, I take it from growing up in a small town, I always create little communities for myself.
Yeah.
Even when I first moved to Florence in it was beginning of 2000, and with my husband, and we were in Borgo San Frediano.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband from Florence, he walks down the same street a whole bunch of times. Well, I formed like friendships with, my butcher and my little, person that sells vegetables. And so, because I feel like I need to feel like this sense of community and wherever I am.
Yeah.
And that's just, even now, the same thing. We moved out of Florence to raise our kids,
right,
to have more space. We went out to San Casciano. The same thing. I felt all these little communities, and Chiesa Nuova and Cerbaia. And during COVID, we moved back to Florence. And I love being able to walk down the street and waving to people that you know, and knowing your neighbors, and feeling at home in this city, which is a very small city.
Exactly.
And now I walk the streets. I've been walking the street for 25 years. And sometimes it's like...
Blows my mind. We've been
mind.
here the same amount of time, you know that?
Really?
I just realized that now.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
Because I came definitively in 98. I got married in 99.
Yeah.
And so we basically, but we met at a women in wine event.
Yes.
Because we're part of the same women's group, which I always talk about. We're both members of WIN.
I love WIN.
I love WIN too.
Love WIN.
And then, I talk about you all the time, and I was in Chianti, as you know, and I mentioned your name to somebody in Valda, and of course, she was like, Alyson, I love Alyson. And everyone I meet who, I mention your name to her, or, I mention your wines, everyone's like, oh, Alyson is the best. So you've done a wonderful job, not only in making incredible wines, but also, I think, of building and finding that community, which is something we talk about a lot on the podcast. People ask me all the time, how do you find community? And I think similarly to what you did in terms of your career, yes, you had some lucky breaks, but you also have to be, proactive people.
Yes,
You have to really also, Florentines are not known for being like the friendliest people in the world, but I've never really had any problems.
Me neither.
And so I think a lot of it is also kind of how you just like throw yourself out, put yourself out there.
How you put yourself out there.
Right?
Exactly.
And I'm just so happy you came today.
Oh,
and
thank you for having me.
I know. I wanted to
love
come.
your podcast.
I know that. So you're coming back. You're coming back.
No, you're fantastic.
You're too kind, but I love your wine, and I want to come back. Maybe we can do. I always say this, but maybe we can do a special video episode at Podere Capaccia when maybe the agriturismo is open.
Yes.
So a little later in the spring, early summer.
Wonderful.
And do a little follow-up so we can show people.
That's a plan.
The wonderful stuff you're doing, and I can taste all of your wonderful wines.
Exactly.
Yeah? Is it a plan?
That is a plan.
Okay.
Yes.
Grazie mille.
Oh, grazie a te.
I loved this.
Oh, me too.
Okay. Grazie a tutti. Thank you once again for tuning in to this week's episode of 15 with Fosca and for continuing to do so. Grazie mille e alla prossima volta.